Well, hi everyone. I'm glad you all could join us. Today, I'll once again be giving voice to some fascinating and perhaps provocative thoughts from Greta Christina. Greta Christina has been writing professionally since 1989 on topics including atheism, sexuality and sex positivity, LGBT issues, politics, culture, and whatever crosses her mind. Greta is one of my favorite outspoken atheists, and I think her writing deserves as much exposure as it can get. So I'm excited to be able to share some of it with you all here today. I also think it's important to amplify the voices of underrepresented groups so that people both inside and outside our community can see that there's more to atheism than just the four horsemen. I've given a couple of talks from her material in the past, including a talk on some atheist thoughts on death and grieving, a talk on what's the harm in a little woo, and a talk on why atheists don't have to show respect for religion. She often writes in the first person, so when you hear me say I and me, that's Greta speaking. Today, I'll be giving voice to her article, Do You Care Whether the Religious Ideas You Believe Are True or Not?, which she published in June of 2010. I've made some very light edits to make it easier to verbalize. Let's dive in. What do you say to religious believers who don't care about reality? I don't mean people who unconsciously don't care about reality. I don't mean people who unconsciously resist or rationalize evidence when it contradicts the things they believe. I get that. That's universally human. Everybody does that. Atheists, believers, everybody. Me and you, and everyone we know. I'm talking about people who consciously, intellectually state that they're less interested in what's really true about the universe than they are about their personal interpretation of it. People who consciously, intellectually state that reality can't be completely understood, and therefore all interpretations of it are equally valid. People who consciously, intellectually state that it's less important to understand reality than it is to not offend people by pointing out that their beliefs are inconsistent with the evidence. People who consciously, intellectually state that even though there's powerful evidence against the belief that, say, consciousness is animated by an immaterial soul that survives death, or that life was shaped into being by a loving God, or what have you, that it's still reasonable for them to hold those beliefs. People who consciously, intellectually state that when it comes right down to it, they don't care whether the things they believe are true, and who firmly defend that position. What do you say to them? As an atheist writer, I, Greta, have been having this weird series of conversations about religion with believers who take this position. Some of them take it in a very hardline relativist way. They insist there's no reality other than the one we create in our minds. Or they insist that even though there probably is an external reality, there's no way to truly understand it. So it's completely reasonable to live in the world as we create it in our heads, and to interpret reality in whatever way gives us comfort and pleasure, regardless of whether that interpretation jibes with, evidence about how reality works. Others are more slippery about this position. They'll state their religious beliefs, and then, when challenged to provide some evidence supporting those beliefs, they'll say something like, that's just what I believe. None of us can prove for 100% certain whether our beliefs are right. We all choose what to believe. So what's the point in debating who's right? I'll be honest. I find it very hard to argue against this position, mostly because I find it so utterly baffling. The idea that reality matters, the idea that we ought to care whether the things we believe are true, to me, this is close to a fundamental axiom. And when people say they don't care about that, it leaves my jaw hanging in dumbfounded silence. But that makes it a topic worth getting into. I like questioning my fundamental axioms. So Why should we care whether the things we believe are true? Why should we treat the external, objective reality of the universe as more important than the internal, subjective reality of our personal experience? Why is the universe more important than me? Well, for starters, the universe is about 13.73 billion years old, and it's about 93 billion light years across. I, Greta, am 48 years old, and I'm 5'3". Not to be ageist or a size queen, but really, when I look at those numbers, do I honestly have to ask why the universe is more important and more interesting than the inside of my head or of anybody's head? I'm not saying the insides of people's heads aren't important or interesting. Of course they are. They're what makes art interesting, and literature, and so on. And they're what makes psychology and neuropsychology interesting as well. The insides of people's heads are fascinating, and they matter. But the world inside a person's head is just one tiny fragment of the vast, ancient, wildly freaky complexity of existence. Why would I give that tiny fragment greater priority than the vast, freaky complexity? Even if the head that this tiny fragment is inside happens to be my own. To me, that seems like the absolute height of arrogance. In fact, I'd argue that it's more than just arrogant. It borders on unethical. Understanding that our own experience is not the only one, that other people matter to themselves just as much as we do to ourselves, that none of us has a pipeline to the truth. Understanding that we are not the most important being in the universe. Having the ability to view life from an outside perspective and acknowledge that we don't, cosmically speaking, matter more than anyone else. That is the core of human ethics. To argue that our personal view of reality is every bit as important as reality itself, to insist that it's valid to frame reality any way we like, without regard to the actual evidence about it, that's placing ourselves at the center of the cosmos. It's saying that our personal experience really is the most important one. It's defending the validity of being out of touch, of living inside our heads. Perspective is more than an intellectual obligation, more than an intellectual discipline. It's a moral obligation. The willingness to step back from our experience, to examine our beliefs about the world and let go of them when the evidence contradicts them, is a huge part of how we gain the humility we need to see our true place in the world. Caring whether the things we believe are true is a crucial part of caring, period. This isn't just about philosophy, though. It isn't even just about the vital branch of philosophy known as ethics. There are purely pragmatic reasons for whether the things we believe matter. We need to understand reality so that we know how to behave in it. If we believe things about reality that aren't true, we're going to make bad decisions. If we believe that we failed our English test because our teacher has it in for us, we're not going to study harder for our next test. If we believe that we keep getting stomach aches because we hate our job, we're not going to quit having Doritos and Red Bull for breakfast. If we believe that we can turn on the TV by hitting it with a rock, we're going to miss America's Best Dance Crew. It's like the data processors say, garbage in, garbage out. And this applies to religious and spiritual beliefs as well. If we believe that we failed our English test because Mercury was in retrograde, or that our stomach aches are God's punishment for thinking impure thoughts about Lady Gaga, we're still not going to study or knock off the Doritos. Understanding reality is how we know how to behave in it. Understanding cause and effect, which causes lead to what effects, is how we make better decisions. Decisions that are more likely to outcomes we're hoping for. And if we're going to understand reality, we have to care whether the things we believe are true. We can't tell ourselves that we create our own reality until we're blue in the face. If we don't create our personal reality from the best possible understanding of the larger reality around us, if we don't create our personal reality by eating a healthy diet and doing our English homework and so on, reality is going to bite us in the ass. Of course, there are some very pragmatic, nuts and bolts ways that our beliefs about reality affect reality. Being optimistic can help us see more opportunities. Being good to people draws other good people to us, etc. But there's nothing magical about that. It's just human psychology, based, I'd like to point out, on observable cause and effect. Exactly the kind of reality I think people should care about. What's more, if we care about reality, we have to apply reasonable standards of probability and plausibility to it. When faced with solid evidence strongly suggesting that our beliefs almost certainly aren't true, we can't tell ourselves, well, my belief can't lose percent certainty, therefore it's reasonable to keep believing it. We can't tell ourselves that the rock this time. We can't be sure it won't. It's telling ourselves that if we actually want to watch TV. Now, impressed with these kinds of questions, many of these believers in the we create a reality and don't true camp agree. They'll say that when it comes to petty, mundane, physical matters, of course they understand cause and effect and want to understand it better so they can create good consequences and avoid bad ones. When they're on the 20th floor of a building, they don't exit the window. They don't act on the principle that they can create their own reality and gently float down the window. They believe in reality and physical cause and effect enough to take the elevator. When it comes to practical matters, of course they care whether the things they believe are true. It's just the grand physical issues, the issues where cause and effect is blindingly obvious, the issues of God and soul, consciousness and whatnot. That's where they feel they can make up any interpretation of reality that makes them happy. Yeah. See, here's the problem with that. It's not so easy to believe whatever you find comforting in cases, and then question or challenge or let go of your beliefs in others. Skepticism is a discipline. It does not come naturally to the human mind. The human mind is wired to what it already believes and what it wants to believe. Habit of questioning whether the things we believe are true and letting go of beliefs we're attached to when the evidence contradicts them takes practice. I, Greta, know that in life, when I still had New Age woo beliefs, we make our own reality rationalization of them, I was much more prone to hanging on to other non-spiritual beliefs that I was attached to. And I was much more prone to attaching myself to beliefs in the first place. I found them comforting or easy. My belief that I could make things work with my other boyfriend. There was no connection between my weight and my health. The belief that I ignored my student loans for long enough, the university would give up and go away. All these were much easier to fall into because I was so practiced at convincing myself that it was reasonable to believe pretty much whatever I wanted. What's more, my spiritual beliefs were very slippery. a phenomenon I've noticed in many other believers. When confronted with strong evidence that contradicted my beliefs, I'd pull out the line, "This may not be literally true, but it works for me." But when I was alone or with others who shared my beliefs, I bloody well believed those things, entirely and literally. And again, that slipperiness, that willingness to slide back and forth between wishful thinking and critical thought, depending on convenience and who was watching and how attached I was to the ideas, slopped into the practical areas of my life, often with truly lousy consequences. But after I started applying skepticism to religion and eventually let go of my spiritual beliefs, I became much better at critical thinking. In all areas of my life, politics, relationships, money, health, everything. I became much better at asking, what's the evidence for this? Is this consistent with what we know about the world? What are the arguments for and against? This is often not easy. I'm human, with a human tendency to believe what I already believe or what I want to believe. And better critical thinking often means letting go of ideas I'm very attached to. But the practice I had letting go of religion makes this much easier and much more natural. Again, skepticism is a discipline. It takes practice. And when we let ourselves believe whatever the hell we like about God or the afterlife, it gets far too easy to let ourselves believe whatever the hell we like about everything else. Which leads back to the question of ethics. When pressed to the wall in these debates, believers will often wind up saying things like, "Why do you care what I believe? Living in my self-created reality where God loves me and I'm never going to die makes me happy. What difference does it make to anyone else?" But rejecting evidence about reality doesn't just affect ourselves. It means rejecting the reality of how our actions affect other people. It means rejecting the realities of money, of sex, of showing up to work on time, of foreign policy, of global warming, in favor of stories we find familiar and comforting. And I see that play out with religious believers every day of my life. But beyond all that, beyond my philosophical objections, my ethical objections, even my pragmatic objections, I have another, stronger, far more serious objection to people who say they don't care if the things they believe are true. I don't believe them. If you really don't care whether the things you believe are true, then why are you defending those beliefs on an atheist's blog? Why are you arguing so passionately and at such great length that your solipsistic cultural relativism is a valid viewpoint? Why don't you just shrug off my arguments for atheism and materialism and go about your merry way in your self-created reality? Why do you care what I think? Here's the thing. I think religious believers do care whether the things they believe are true. The ones who comment about their beliefs on atheists' blogs sure as hell do. I think they comment on atheist blogs because they want validation for their beliefs. They want atheists to say, "No, your beliefs aren't like all those others. Those other beliefs are crazy, but yours make sense." Or they want atheists to say, "Wow, I haven't heard that one before. How fascinating and well thought out." It's only when that response isn't forthcoming that the cultural relativism gets dragged out. It's only when atheists say, "Actually, your belief isn't any more consistent with the evidence or reason than anyone else's." When we say, "Yes, I've heard that one before about 100 times. It still doesn't hold up." It's only then that believers start insisting that they don't care about stupid old reality anyway. I think religious believers do care whether the things they believe are true, and they should. Caring about reality is a fundamental part of what makes us human. Human beings are explorers. We're curious. We want to find out what's behind that rock, that mountain, that ocean, that galaxy. We want to find out what's inside that tree, that flower, that cell, that atom. And that curiosity is one of the best things about us. That curiosity has led us to a greater understanding of the vast, ancient, wildly freaky complexity of existence than we ever thought possible. That curiosity is why we understand what we do about galaxies and continental drift and matter being mostly empty space and everything that's alive being related and any number of compellingly fascinating, completely counterintuitive realities. What's more, that curiosity has led to innumerable advances in the quality of human life. That curiosity is why we understand that diseases are caused by germs and viruses and genetics and so on, instead of evil spirits or imbalances in the bodily humors. That curiosity is why we understand that we ought not to let raw sewage run in the streets or in our drinking water. That curiosity is why we can talk to each other over the internet. Curiosity about how reality works is one of the finest things about humanity. We ought not to abandon it whenever it makes us uncomfortable or forces us to let go of beliefs we're attached to. We ought to care more about reality than we do about the stories we tell ourselves about it. We ought to care more than just about anything else, whether the things we believe are true. Thank you.